Hello, everyone. It's 2 o'clock. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes for people to join in. We've got quite a few people registered for this event. Welcome to the virtual public information session, A Decade of Progress on PFAS and Beyond. If you have any technical questions or issues, please call 518-402-8005. We'll be getting started in a minute or two. Thanks. Okay, we're just going to give it one more minute. Still have a lot of people joining. Okay, it's a couple minutes after. I know people are still joining, but I know we have a lot on the agenda. So, Pam, whenever you're ready, we can get started.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Pam Haddad-Hurst. I'm a special assistant to the commissioner at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, working on chemical policy and sustainability. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge Governor Kathy Hochul for guiding our actions and prioritizing drinking water and natural resource protection for the benefit of all New Yorkers. Ensuring that New Yorkers have reliable and resilient water infrastructure is a top priority for the governor and also for DEC. In this past month, we've announced a suite of significant new actions and helpful resources to protect, educate, and assist New York communities in addressing the threat of PFAS contamination. PFAS are a class of human-made chemicals that have been widely used in various consumer, commercial, and industrial products since the 1940s. 10 years ago, we didn't have the volumes of PFAS data and research that we have now. It really wasn't until PFAS contamination was confirmed in the drinking water of the village of Hoosick Falls that New York State and then the nation really began to understand PFAS chemicals and their impact on the environment. The comprehensive and community-based response to Hoosick Falls launched New York's decade-long leadership in working with communities to clean up contamination, hold polluters accountable, set stringent policies and requirements to prevent public exposure, and make record investments in drinking water protection. It also launched a comprehensive examination into how widespread PFAS and other emerging contaminants have become. They can be found in water, air, and soil, and they're present in countless consumer products and foods due to their use in making materials resistant to water, grease, and stains. Exposure is widespread because they're found in everyday items like nonstick cookware, food packaging, stain-resistant fabrics, firefighting foam, and they're used in many industrial processes. PFAS don't readily break down naturally in the environment. They remain in the human body for a long time, and they've been linked to a range of health effects. Working on short and long-term strategies to fully address PFAS and their legacy is daunting, but New York State is on the right course. Record investments in protecting drinking water, cleaning up contamination, and efforts to prevent the introduction of PFAS into the environment in the first place are being implemented successfully statewide. This past spring, on behalf of Governor Hochul, DEC Commissioner Amanda Lefton, and DOH Commissioner James McDonald, along with many other partners, celebrated the completion of the permanent water transmission line that connects Hoosick Falls to a new groundwater source for the village's water treatment plant. This major milestone was the culmination of a decade-long collaborative partnership with the State Department of Health, local officials, and concerned residents. Governor Hochul, DEC, DOH, and partners, including Attorney General James and the state legislature, numerous environmental and health advocates, academic institutions, and many others have all helped contribute to significant milestones like this over the past decade. Some of our accomplishments include in 2020, New York State was one of the first states to develop its own enforceable health-based drinking water standards for two different PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS. Then in 2023, DEC finalized water quality guidance values for PFOA, PFOS, and 1,4-dioxane, along with guidance for industrial wastewater discharges to prevent exposure to emerging contaminants by protecting drinking water sources. DEC also classified PFOA and PFOS as hazardous substances, incorporating stringent cleanup requirements for soil and groundwater remediation programs. DEC leads comprehensive emergency responses to contaminated drinking water supplies. We also lead the installation of treatment systems, site cleanups, and we hold polluters accountable. DEC has developed guidance for sampling and analysis. We've restricted or banned PFAS in products, and we've implemented policies to limit PFAS in biosolids recycling. DEC and DOH prevent direct exposure to the public by sampling for contaminants in fish and wildlife and issuing advice for eating. So these and many other highlights are of New York State's response are included in a new report that's available on DEC's website. We'll provide some links to that later. But these actions have set us on a path forward for the initiatives and resources that we're going to be talking about today. So New York State is leading national efforts to understand PFAS and take action to ensure that communities have access to clean drinking water, as well as the tools to hold people accountable. To date, DEC has sampled more than 5,000 private wells across New York State as part of various investigations into potential contaminant sources and in response to community concerns. Alternate water supply provision has been conducted at active or former spill sites, industrial sites, and at dump sites and landfills under the state Superfund brownfield cleanup and inactive landfill initiative programs. In addition to finding PFAS at contaminated sites that we address with our cleanup programs, data suggests that domestic wastewater can be a source of PFAS. This challenge is being seen in municipal wastewater treatment plant sampling, as well as in private drinking water wells, after materials that are discharged into private septic systems break down, potentially leaching into aquifers. It was DEC's groundbreaking investigations that helped trace contamination exceeding the state drinking water standards back to domestic wastewater. And our progress has only begun. In the last decade, DEC's dedicated experts have been on the ground in hundreds of communities to investigate and mitigate the potential threats that PFAS present to public health. Under the leadership of Governor Hochul, with some recently announced resources and more work underway, DEC is advancing science-based collaborative initiatives that will keep New Yorkers informed and protected. Today, you're going to hear a little bit more about research, policies, and guidance as part of the state's commitment to comprehensively assess and address PFAS sources, protect water supplies, and provide the state with critically important data to inform the next steps to prevent PFAS exposure and protect public health. But before we get to that, I want to thank the New York State Department of Health for their leadership and collaboration. And I'm going to introduce the Department of Health's Director of Strategic Operations for the Center for Environmental Health, Dr. Katie Bush, who's going to provide a brief overview of the critical role that DOH plays in protecting New Yorkers from PFAS. So Katie.
Hi, thank you. As Pam mentioned, I'm Katie Bush. I serve as the Director of Strategic Operations at the Center for Environmental Health here within the New York State Department of Health. Thank you to our partners at the Department of Environmental Conservation for inviting us to participate in today's meeting, and thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure to join you today in order to provide an update on our current collaborative work focused on reducing exposure to PFAS. The New York State Department of Health takes great pride in our decade-long effort to detect PFAS in the environment, investigate potential sources, and understand routes of human exposure and associated health impacts. Two specific PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFAS, have highlighted the need for ongoing vigilance when it comes to what we call emerging contaminants. These chemicals were incorporated into common industrial processes and household products, while risk assessments and epidemiologic analyses lagged. We now have a much greater understanding of the risk due to their persistence in the environment and their ability to bioaccumulate. Our understanding of the health effects have also evolved. A growing body of scientific evidence indicates that PFAS can upset the normal functioning of various organs, systems, and biological pathways, causing adverse health effects that range from some types of cancer to developmental delays to changes in cholesterol and cardiovascular health, even at relatively low levels of exposure. Over the last 10 years, the Department of Health's primary role has been to understand the science and translate it into protective public health policies in coordination with the Department of Environmental Conservation. This work has focused on setting allowable limits in drinking water, known as maximum contaminant levels, in soil, known as soil cleanup objectives, as well as surface water, air, and fish. That work informs guidelines and advisories. In 2020, New York State set maximum contaminant levels of 10 parts per trillion, or 10 ppt, for PFOA and PFAS. New York's drinking water standards for emerging contaminants were among the most protective in the country. In addition, DOH's Bureau of Water Supply Protection has worked with the Environmental Facilities Corps to award over $450 million to more than 100 emerging contaminant drinking water infrastructure projects across the state. Our Bureau of Environmental Exposure Investigation works in conjunction with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to investigate PFAS contamination at sites across the state. And our Bureaus of Environmental and Occupational Epidemiology and Toxic Substance Assessment are participating in 2 comprehensive biomonitoring projects to learn more about the complex relationship between PFAS exposure and human health. As this work continues to inform cleanup programs and infrastructure improvements, the public's exposure to common PFAS have markedly decreased. The Department of Health has worked with municipalities across the state to reduce PFAS exposure from public water supplies through funding received from both the state and federal government. We appreciate the funding and support that Governor Hochul and her team have put towards addressing emerging contaminants such as PFAS in drinking water. We know there's more work to do, but are heartened by the progress to date. At the Department of Health, we continue to work with the Drinking Water Quality Council, an expert advisory body that meets twice a year to help ensure we are leading the way in public health protection with respect to PFAS and other emerging contaminants. The coordinated effort between the 2 agencies to identify, mitigate, communicate, and ultimately protect New Yorkers from PFAS exposure has drastically decreased PFAS exposure for millions of New Yorkers, and we are committed to continuing this work as we strive to stay at the forefront of protecting public health. With that, Pam, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Katie. Craig, we can move to the next slide. So Governor Kathy Hochul continues to solidify New York State's position as a national leader in prioritizing drinking water quality. The state's making record investments in infrastructure funding to help lower the cost to municipalities treating and enhancing water quality. Following the state's initial response to the emerging threat of PFAS contamination, since 2017, New York has invested $6 billion in clean water infrastructure and offers more than $1 billion annually in low-cost loans. Next slide. A total of $474 million since 2015 has been awarded to support drinking water projects that specifically address emerging contaminants. New York State has also provided more than $97 million in revolving loans, and it's supported by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The availability of grants and low-cost financing also complements the $3.7 billion 5-year proposal that was just announced in January at the Governor's State of the State address to help support DEC's water quality improvement projects and other programs to help governments invest in critical water infrastructure. So these combined investments underscore New York's commitment to protecting its natural resources. Next slide. Okay, to build on these investments, DEC is taking a number of actions to protect New Yorkers. Through ongoing research, policies, regulations, and guidance, DEC and DOH will continue working with partners to assist property owners, local governments, and other stakeholders to safeguard drinking water and mitigate exposure to ensure the protection of public health and the environment. Next slide. In December, DEC announced some actions to prevent and address PFAS contamination, including guidance for publicly owned wastewater treatment plants, a draft policy on sampling PFAS in biosolid products, a soil background study, a draft policy on assistance for contaminated water supplies, and we also announced the intention to develop regulations requiring municipal solid waste landfill leachate to be treated prior to discharge. And of course, we continue to take action to prevent pollution. Next slide. DEC just issued final technical operational guidance for wastewater treatment plants. And this new guidance outlines how DEC is going to collect information on contaminants from publicly owned treatment works. And it recommends pollutant minimization programs and recommends compliance schedules in state pollutant discharge permits to identify and address significant upstream sources contributing these contaminants to wastewater flows. In addition, DEC made emerging contaminant data from ambient, surface, and wastewater monitoring available to the public through the Division of Water's new PFAS and 1,4-dioxane information portal. So we hope that you will check that out. Next slide. So biosolids recycling offers real benefits, including supporting soil health and cutting greenhouse gas emissions by diverting material from landfills. And of course, these benefits depend on ensuring that biosolid products are managed and don't threaten water quality, agriculture, human health, or the environment. DEC continues to make progress implementing our policy, which we call DMM7, on sampled recycled biosolids as we're working towards finalizing proposed regulations. The state is also funding sampling programs, including a research project at SUNY ESF that's looking at the relationship between influent, effluent, and biosolids at all water resource recovery facilities that recycle biosolids. DEC's Division of Materials Management and Division of Water also have a joint program where we're sampling facilities that recycle biosolids. And currently the first round, we've sent over 26 facilities have been sent a request for information on their influent and effluent. And the data that we collect is going to be distributed to sampled facilities and will be available on an ongoing basis. So both programs are using EPA testing method 1633 and will report all the chemicals under that method. DEC also just issued a draft policy DMM7A that expands on the requirements of DMM7 to require sampling and analysis of soil products produced from biosolids, such as compost and heat-dried products that are produced by permitted in-state facilities, as well as those that are generated outside of the state. This interim policy will remain in place until DEC completes a rulemaking to address PFAS in biosolids and biosolids products that are recycled. This will provide data for DEC to use in the development of our rulemaking. Comments were accepted through early January and we'll be holding a regulatory update stakeholder meeting on Wednesday, February 4th at 1 o'clock. And the link will be provided. It's on DEC's website, and we'll provide that at the end of the presentation. Next slide. DEC also published a rural background study for PFOA and PFOS. We hired environmental professionals and statisticians to help us understand the presence of PFAS in soil throughout New York State. Building upon previous studies the state has performed on other contaminants like mercury, lead, and arsenic, DEC selected areas in rural parts of the state to sample so that the results wouldn't be affected by industrial or urban sources of PFAS. The results show that one or more PFAS were present in nearly every rural soil sample taken in the study. PFOS was detected in 97% of the samples, and PFOA was present in 76.5%. Analysis of the results indicates that the background soil concentration for PFOS are 3.0 parts per billion, and concentrations for PFOA are 1.5 parts per billion. These results are similar and slightly lower than neighboring states that have done similar background soil studies, including New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maine. This study is going to help inform DEC and the Department of Health's establishment of soil cleanup objectives, which DEC plans to release for public review and comment in 2026. Next slide. So these background levels of PFAS in soil are consistent with what we've seen over the last decade in evaluating groundwater and sources of drinking water. These resources have similarly been contaminated with diffuse non-point sources of PFAS contamination, including wastewater, leachate, home and commercial septic systems, stormwater runoff, and rainwater. At times, industrial sites, landfills, and fire training areas have been identified as major sources of PFAS contamination. DEC has worked over the past decade to address these sites and to eliminate unacceptable human exposures to these compounds. Thanks to Governor Hochul's 10-year, $1.25 billion reauthorization of the state Superfund program last year, we are able to require responsible parties to pay for the treatment and cleanup when they've contaminated both public and private water systems. Improvements were also made to the law to ensure that we're pursuing polluters where we can, and then also understanding what sources of contamination might mean in terms of our response for providing alternate water supplies. DEC has a long-standing policy on how we investigate and then provide alternate water when private drinking water is contaminated. And under this policy, we've sampled about 5,000 private wells and installed thousands of alternate systems to protect drinking water and eliminate exposure to PFAS and other contaminants. The state Superfund law does not authorize DEC, however, to spend public money on contaminated areas, including drinking water, that are not contaminated from an industrial source or spill. So revisions to DEC's alternate water supply policy are necessary to clarify these limitations. That policy is out for public comment until February 10th of 2026. And I'll also note that earlier this year, Governor Hochul announced a new pilot program that will provide financial assistance for certain private well owners. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Katie Bush to talk briefly about that.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you. While addressing PFAS in public water supplies has been a major focus over the last 10 years, we recognize that many people get their drinking water from private drinking water wells, which can also be at risk for PFAS contamination. We're excited to announce that the Department of Health is partnering with the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Environmental Facilities Corporation to launch a private well PFAS testing and mitigation rebate pilot program. This is a pilot program that will be implemented in a small number of selected counties at this time to assess the potential for a statewide program. The pilot program will offer free private well testing for PFAS in these selected counties, which are identified as more likely to be impacted by PFAS. The ultimate goal of the program is to reduce exposure to PFAS contaminants in private well drinking water. The program will provide financial assistance to private well owners in these selected counties to test their private well for PFAS. When PFOA or PFAS concentrations meet or exceed the New York State maximum contaminant levels of 10 parts per trillion, those private well owners will be eligible to apply for a mitigation rebate to support the installation of a treatment system or connection to an existing public water system when feasible. Some additional details on the program include the timing. So the pilot program will officially launch in the first half of 2026. We will announce the participating counties at that time. There will be an online application to apply, and the website will go live when the program is ready to officially launch. As I mentioned, this program is sponsored by the New York State Departments of Health, Environmental Conservation, and Environmental Facilities Corporation in partnership with selected counties. The program will be supported by both state and county agencies. Residents on private wells in those selected counties will be able to apply for financial assistance to test their private well water for PFAS and for a mitigation rebate to install in-home treatment systems or connect to a nearby public water system when feasible. Those property owners will be eligible to apply for a rebate when PFOA or PFAS concentrations meet or exceed the New York State Public Drinking Water Standards of 10 ppt for each. And residents in those selected counties will be able to apply directly to the program. We'll work closely with counties to launch a program that's both feasible to implement and responsive to community needs. Thank you. Back to you, Pam.
Thanks, Katie. So next slide. So in Governor Hochul's State of the State address earlier this month, she announced the intention to develop municipal solid waste landfill leachate regulations that would require leachate to be treated prior to discharge. These updates will make focused adjustments to our regulations, specifying that leachate treatment can occur at a generating landfill or at an offsite location. Locations that treat leachate must be permitted, and we don't plan to specify treatment methods, but instead we're going to specify minimum performance and contaminant removal requirements. So these regulations are going to apply to all operating landfills at the time of adoption, and there will be built-in timeframes for planning, design, testing, and construction. We will be holding a stakeholder meeting on this to receive feedback and ideas on February 11th. Again, a link for that will be on our website with a link we provide at the end of this presentation. Next slide. So we can't end this presentation without covering one of the most effective ways that we can address PFAS, and that's pollution prevention. Next slide. So this slide shows the widespread impact of PFAS sources, and it conveys different factors that contribute to contamination and potential exposures. These include traditional hazardous waste sites that we identify and clean up, but there's other inputs like wastewater, leachate from landfills, septic systems, both private and commercial, stormwater runoff, and even rain. So this diagram shows that PFAS are everywhere, but I also want to say so is DEC. We are focused on addressing all of these in a unified way. DEC's divisions work to identify specific sources and remove them from the environment, and when we can, remove them from commerce to reduce potential toxic chemical exposure. We've developed expertise and are well equipped to identify and address new sources based on our comprehensive approach. Next slide. So DEC is preventing pollution by implementing laws that restrict toxic chemicals, including PFAS, in consumer products. Some of our laws include a law on 1,4-dioxane in cleaning, personal care, and cosmetic products, a law on hazardous packaging that also includes restricting PFAS in food packaging. We restrict certain flame retardants. We'll be restricting PFAS in apparel, and we also have laws on mercury restrictions. So these programs are preventing pollution where the products are made, used, and disposed of, ensuring that toxic chemicals don't end up in recycled products, and reducing exposure throughout a product's life cycle. Next slide. Additional programs to restrict toxic chemicals also include laws on coal tar and pavement sealers, and a law on firefighting foam take-back and restriction of PFAS in firefighting personal protective equipment. These restrictions are keeping toxics out of the environment, and for those take-back programs, this kind of extended producer responsibility reduces the burden on holders of non-compliant products, holding manufacturers responsible for preventing that pollution. Next slide. So PFAS and firefighting foam, the use has been widespread and has contributed greatly to PFAS contamination in New York State. Next slide. Class B firefighting foams, also known as aqueous film forming foams or AFFF, have historically used PFOS and other PFAS chemicals as a primary active ingredient. Many of the most significant contaminated sites in New York State are related to the use of AFFF. So between 2017 and 2020, DEC managed a take-back program to address legacy PFAS-containing firefighting foams, and we collected 40,000 gallons of AFFF products. Then in 2020, New York State passed a law that prohibits the use of AFFF for fire training purposes, and it also prohibits the sale and or distribution of AFFF containing foams, containing PFAS, effective as of March 2022. So this requires manufacturers to recall those Class B foams, and the recall provision was interpreted by the manufacturers to include only products that were sold after the effective date of the law in 2022. So the law was revised again in 2025 to clarify that that recall provision applies to all AFFF with intentionally added PFAS that was sold at any time. So DEC, DOH, and State Fire have sent a letter out to manufacturers to begin the conversation about how that recall is going to be implemented by the manufacturers. Next slide. So far, we've presented a lot of information. You don't have to remember it all. We've developed some new resources to summarize our work and educate the public. Next slide. In December, DEC issued a retrospective report on the many ways that we're making progress to address PFAS since it was first confirmed in the drinking water of Hoosick Falls in New York. The report outlines our nation-leading efforts to understand PFAS and its effects on the environment, as well as the actions needed to ensure that communities have access to clean drinking water and the tools that they need to hold polluters accountable. It explores how DEC prioritizes reducing and eliminating unacceptable human exposure to PFAS, working closely with our Department of Health and local health departments to ensure that water quality meets the state's strict standards. It also shows the significant effort that we've put into investigating and addressing pollution sources to protect public health and the environment. And while PFAS present unique regulatory challenges because of their persistence in the environment, potential health effects, and historic widespread use in manufacturing and industry, this report outlines how New York State is actively responding to PFAS and advancing efforts to clean up and regulate these contaminants. Next slide. So this new report, along with an updated website, are designed to raise public awareness of PFAS prevalence, resources available to assist, and opportunities to weigh in on current and future policies and regulations being developed to address PFAS. DEC is forging a cleaner path forward by prioritizing the removal and prevention of many forms of PFAS pollution to help create healthier ecosystems and communities. Along with our partners, we will continue to engage the public and examine ways to help limit the introduction of PFAS into the environment. Many of the accomplishments and initiatives that we presented today were driven by the public, and to ensure that we maintain a working dialogue with communities, DEC's resources about PFAS can now be found on a dedicated web page to support ongoing education and engagement efforts. So the website is dec.ny.gov/PFAS. The webpage offers additional resources on PFAS contamination and provides opportunities, again, for the public to comment on current and future policies and regulations. So we encourage the public to visit the site and stay informed by subscribing to newsletters and other notices through DEC's newsletter service, DEC Delivers. And we want to thank folks for joining us today. And at this point, I am going to turn this over to DEC's Division of Environmental Remediation Director, Andy Guglielmi, to facilitate our Q&A session.
Thank you, Pam. Again, my name's Andy Guglielmi. I'm the director of the Division of Environmental Remediation. That's my day job. What I'm going to try and do here today is be MC. So what we will be doing, you can see there's a bunch of panelists here. They're from our various divisions here at DEC. One is the division that I'm the director of, Environmental Remediation. We also have staff from the Division of Water, the Division of Materials Management, the Division of Air, and then we also have staff, you've already heard from Katie Bush and others at the Department of Health to answer some questions that may be coming the Department of Health's way. So what I'll ask the panelists to do as I go through, I'm going to call on various people. If you haven't introduced yourself yet, please do, so people know who you are when you're speaking. I'll remind you of that if you don't. And what I'm going to start with today is when folks registered, we received a list of questions already. So I'm going to go with those questions that we received when folks registered first. I see there's already been some questions in the chat. You might see my head turning here because I'm trying to read the chat and assign people questions and do stuff like that. So just be aware of that. I'm going to be trying to monitor this in real time. So let's just dive right in. One other thing I should say. Yeah, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. This is scheduled to end at 3 o'clock, but we know we already had a lot of questions that came in. There's some questions on the chat. We're going to go to 3:15. So we'll do our best to get through all of the questions. If there are questions that aren't answered, we will be putting together a response to those questions that we can provide afterwards on some of the websites that I think the webpage that Pam already mentioned, our PFAS webpage here at DEC. So don't be worried if we don't get to your question. We will do our best to respond to it afterwards in writing. So with that, let's just start getting to questions and answers. And I'll take the first one. So the first question that we received was, are there any areas with PFAS on your radar that haven't been fully investigated? So this is a good question. You heard from Pam during her opening remarks that unfortunately PFAS are ubiquitous. We're finding them in soil and water in many areas of the state, even areas that aren't connected to industrial sources or urban areas. But as I said before in some of my opening remarks, DEC is everywhere too, right? We have this interdisciplinary working group that's been working for several years from our various divisions to try and identify where we're finding PFAS. And if we're finding it, working with our partners at the Department of Health to eliminate exposure. That's principally what we're doing as far as investigating, making sure that we're addressing the most significant sources of PFAS. To be more specific, we have sampled all of our existing Superfund brownfield sites for PFAS at this point. We are also, our Division of Materials Management is investigating groundwater at more than 1,200 inactive landfills. You may be aware of Clean Water Infrastructure Act that passed several years ago that includes an inactive landfill initiative to see if those are sources of PFAS. And our Division of Water also monitors ambient waters for PFAS, and that data is also up on our website as well. As Pam mentioned, our division, DER, hired consultants for us to try and figure out what rural soils look like. Again, we're finding PFAS nearly everywhere, but the real priority, right? Again, we're working to prioritize our action with the fact that we're finding PFAS in a lot of areas to reduce exposure. Provide clean drinking water, whether it be public water systems. We mentioned Hoosick Falls is a real prominent one where we've made a lot of progress in providing clean drinking water there, but also private wells that are impacted by sites. And really focusing on the most significant sources of PFAS, those being, manufacturing facilities like Sanko Bay and up in Hoosick Falls, airports, fire training centers, fire departments, and Department of Defense sites. That's where at least our division is focusing a lot of our work. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. And Pam, this one's going to go to you. How are we handling PFAS other than PFOA and PFOS? Pam, can you hear me? You might be on mute.
Yes. I'm
No
sorry,
problem. Go ahead.
Andy. I didn't I didn't realize questions were coming to me. Um,
I could take it if you want. I could take
yeah,
this one
I was
too.
like, hey, I thought I was done.
No,
No, that's
no,
fine.
this one, and this was a lot in your presentation already. How are we handling PFAS other than PFOA and PFOS? Again, we're working closely with the Department of Health to better understand the risks with all the other PFAS chemicals. So, you know, other PFAS chemicals have been identified as emerging contaminants that we do sample for. There's a whole suite of PFAS. Pam mentioned some of the methods for PFAS testing that are reported on. So when we're addressing PFOA and PFOS, we are also addressing all those other PFAS that we're finding through treatment. A lot of the treatment in terms of drinking water being through carbon, granular activated carbon, is a way that a lot of these water systems where we're finding PFAS can remove contamination in drinking water. Not only that, we have our pollution prevention team, which works on restricting PFAS in products. Our remediation program deals with legacy contamination, and our SPEEDIES and wastewater permitting program. They also include a full suite of PFAS in their testing to inform permitting actions and what we would permit from dischargers. All right, next question. Is DEC considering the current economic situation for municipalities and working with funding sources for solutions? Yes, we are, and I think identifying that this widespread ubiquitous PFAS problem was going to be difficult, costly, especially costly for municipalities, is something that Governor Hochul has focused on. Pam mentioned in some of her introductory slides all the investments, you know, $6 billion in clean water infrastructure and $1 billion in low-cost loans. This would go to, you know, public water systems that are trying to address PFAS in their water systems. Also, just this year in the State of the State, I think Pam mentioned this as well, low-cost financing and grants available to the tune of $3.75 billion over 5 years to support water quality improvement projects. Those are specific investments. Beyond that, we also, with respect to biosolids, which you'll hear about later, because I know we got some biosolid questions as well. There's these 2 initial sampling programs that the state has taken on, the cost associated with that sampling to not put onus on municipal entities. And then finally, Pam mentioned this too, there was a state Superfund reauthorization that included an exemption for municipalities that may have used PFAS, for instance, to train for fires or to actually treat fires. And that liability exemption is something that we're working with various municipalities throughout the state right now on trying to address, and then the state would take on a lot of the costs associated with cleaning up those sites. Okay. I'm going to pass this to other people now. I'm sick of talking. Next one. Question is, my PFAS test is off the chart. How can I get hooked up to a local water supply? Dave Chisano, could you introduce yourself and take that one, please?
I will do, sir. Name's Dave Chisano. I work for Andy in the Division of Environmental Remediation with the DEC. I'm an engineer and project director. My main responsibility is to manage the provision, monitoring, and maintenance of alternate water supplies, primarily on private water supply wells across the state of New York. With this question, Andy, I generally would, if I got this question, I would basically say, first and foremost, I would recommend they reach out to their local water authority or their municipal water department to see if there's any plans to extend or, you know, increase the amount of public water in the community. You know, I get this question a lot. Some people say, can I get connected? The first thing I would say is there a water line in front of your house? And that's when I would say reach out to the municipality to see if there's any plans to extend in front of the house. If there isn't, I would concurrently reach out to the local health department, the state health department, to first see if you have to mitigate any potential exposures or answer any questions or concerns you have about public health for you and your family. And at the same time, I would suggest reaching out to the DEC to see if there's any potential sites or spills in the area that may be contributing to the contamination. If there happens to be a spill or site, there is some financial assistance that can be given, and if there is, the state can come in and provide an alternate water supply, maintain it and monitor it accordingly. And Katie mentioned earlier, hopefully in the future, if there isn't a site involved and this PFAS contamination is associated with some background contamination or domestic discharges that are not associated with a site, there'll be a pilot program to sample your well and provide some funding rebates for people who put mitigation systems on.
Thank you, Dave. Don't go off camera though, because the next one's for you too. So we got a question about a specific area, the town of Cairo. Are there plans to help with our water supply is the question, Dave. And I know there is a site that our division works on called the American Thermostat site. It's not a PFAS site, but it's another site that has volatile organic compound contamination associated with it. But yeah, if you could take that one too, please do.
No problem. Yeah, you're correct, Andy. There's a site about 4 miles away from the public water supply wells in Cairo. And the state is working with the local community, the county, and EPA to extend water lines in the vicinity of the site, approximately a half mile, to people who have private water supply wells that are threatened or have been impacted from the contamination originating from the site. That work is going to be done in 2 phases. The first phase will be to connect a mobile home park, which has approximately 75 residents in. And the second phase will evolve more extension around a block around the community. It's about 12 homes that will be able to connect to the water supply once it's extended. Again, that work may start next year, but this year the work is expected to start in the spring. And I believe EPA is going to be sending out a mailer pretty soon announcing a public meeting to discuss the first phase of the project and where the project's going. So that if you're on a contact list for that particular site, you will be getting a mailing about a public meeting upcoming in March, I believe.
Great. Thank you, Dave. All right, I'm going to turn to Bill Ottaway. Bill, the question we received is, someone is interested in the progress on DEC's rural background study. If you
Thanks.
could introduce yourself and take that. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi there, Bill Ottaway. I also work for Andy in the Division of Environmental Remediation. As Pam mentioned, the rural background study was completed and released for to the public. We will be working on applying the information from that rural background study to establish soil cleanup objectives for PFOA and PFOS this coming calendar year. One of the things I want to note, Pam mentioned levels of 3.0 for PFOS and 1.5 for PFOA. Those are the 95th percentile upper tolerance level. So that's basically as high as you could possibly get for it to still be considered background. The average numbers are significantly lower than that, 0.65 for PFOS and 0.35 for PFOA. So the average levels aren't nearly as high as those upper tolerance levels. So back to you, Andy.
Thank you, Bill. Next question is for Molly Tremblay. This is on biosolids. How can farms determine if biosolids were spread on their land before current ownership?
Good question. Hi, this is Molly Tremblay. I work in our Division of Materials Management here at DEC, specifically in the organics reduction and recycling section. We do more than just manage biosolids. Food scraps, yard trimmings, anything that falls in the solid waste sphere that can break down falls into our under our section. When materials are being managed or recycled, beneficially used, if biosolids are involved, that activity is permitted under DEC. So, for example, the land application of biosolids on any ag land is a permitted activity. Within the permit itself, under 361-2, we do require the permittee to add details for each field and associate application rates with each of those fields in their permit application and then again in their annual reporting. So you can access online all the land application facility annual reports to look that for yourself. But if you do have a specific site question, you can also reach out to DEC, either your regional staff or us here in Division of Materials Management, and we can look into that for you. One thing to add, Class A products, right? So finished composts, heat dried pellets, things like that. That are permitted as a Class A material. Those end uses and destinations are not tracked by DEC, but anything that falls under the permit of land application, we can look for you. So no problem there.
Great, thank you, Molly. And one other biosolids question, so you can stay on camera there. What supports, financial and otherwise, will be provided to POTWs and communities to offset the increased cost of managing biosolids?
Yeah, and this is a great question. We've heard this quite a bit. So as we progress towards managing PFAS and biosolids, we've worked on funding 2 sampling programs so far. I think that Andy might have mentioned that earlier a little bit, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. We wanted to be able to reduce both the financial and staffing burdens faced by municipalities and the plants themselves. First, a research study, it's an ESF, is ongoing. Utilizing DEC staff, we went out to every one of the about 90 wastewater treatment plants that recycle their biosolids in one way or another, and took samples on influent, effluent, and biosolids at each of those sites. This was started in response to program policy DMM7, which Pam discussed, is looking at requiring sampling of those biosolid sources going into recycling facilities. And hopefully we're trying to alleviate concerns from municipalities about costs and lab availability at the time as well. Secondly, we have a private third-party lab contract through our Division of Water that was contracted to do another round of biosolids sampling, the same plants, all the POTWs that send their biosolids for recycling, either in or out of state. So all sampling costs are being covered by DEC for this program as well. And all that data will be public on one of the information portals that you can receive a link to online. And so that data can also be used for DMM7 compliance purposes, which takes a little bit of the financial onus off municipalities as we move forward. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Molly. Next, a landfill question. And this is going to Paula. Is it possible to correct existing water contamination from landfills?
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon. My name is Paola Munar Moreno. I lead the Solid Waste Planning, Combustion, and Disposal section in the Division of Materials Management here at the DEC. Our group manages municipality solid waste management plans, as well as solid waste disposal and combustion facilities. To answer your question, so most DEC efforts to date have been focused on treating water supplies affected by PFAS, primarily using granular activated carbon systems. To control contaminated groundwater plumes at remedial sites, our efforts have included targeted excavation of the most contaminated soils, capping of any remaining soils, and activated carbon injection. The DEC collaborates with municipalities to identify water supply solutions that best suit the community's needs, as Pam had mentioned, such as extending public water lines. Additionally, and this was also mentioned, I believe, by you, and it was the Inactive Landfill Initiative. It was established to investigate and evaluate potential impacts on drinking water. And through the ILI program, the Inactive Landfill Initiative, the DEC has focused efforts on inactive solid waste disposal sites and their potential impacts on New York's drinking water sources, with particular focus on emerging contaminants such as PFAS.
Thank you, Paula. Next, some products questions, and I saw actually one on the chat as well. And this is for Connor Shea. First one, what is DEC doing now to ramp up capacity to, quote unquote, turn off the tap on PFAS to reduce the cost of filtration and cleanup?
All right, thanks, Andy. Yeah, hi, I'm Connor Shea. I'm the section supervisor for the pollution prevention unit here at DEC. So a lot of our work focuses on implementing restrictions on toxic chemicals in consumer products. So I'll take care of this question. So yeah, regarding turning off the tap, I would say a couple things there. So DEC is implementing a number of laws that restrict the presence of PFAS in consumer products, which in turn keeps these products out of our homes, out of landfills, and out of the environment. So these laws include prohibitions on the sale of food packaging, apparel, and carpet containing PFAS. And as noted in the State Solid Waste Management Plan, DEC is also working with the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute and their partner universities to better understand the presence of toxic materials like PFAS in products in a way that will enhance our implementation of programs that restrict their use. So another example of how we are turning off the tap is through our implementation of the restrictions on the sale of firefighting foams that contain PFAS or historically contained PFAS. So DEC has sent letters to companies that sold these foams in New York, reminding them of recent changes in New York state law that requires them to recall these products no matter when they were manufactured or sold. And major manufacturers have already indicated to us that they'll be working with their customers to recall those products. So really altogether, these actions will result in a reduction of the amount of PFAS entering the environment, which will reduce the treatment and cleanup burden over time.
Thanks, Connor. A couple more on products for you. One is asking, is there any suggested cookingware that is PFAS free and safe to use?
Yeah, so a little bit of background on that topic. So DEC participates in a multi-agency group known as the Green New York Council, which has developed green purchasing specifications for many products and services. One of those product categories is cookware and bakeware. And these specifications recommend state agencies purchase items that are not made with chemical nonstick coatings, which can often contain PFAS. So in terms of items to look for, PFAS-free cookware could be made from a number of different materials. It could be aluminum, carbon steel, cast iron, ceramic, glass, FDA-compliant food-grade silicone, or stainless steel. But I would offer that buyers should be mindful that PFAS-based nonstick coatings may be marketed under various different trade names, and claims that an item is PFOA-free doesn't necessarily mean that it's free of all of the thousands of other PFAS chemicals.
Great, thank you. And then one last question, which actually I think we got beforehand, and also I saw something similar in the chat. Can you talk a little bit about what the federal government is doing to eliminate PFOA from products, or any bans that the federal government might have instituted on products?
Sure, yeah. So at the federal level, there isn't per se a comprehensive ban on PFAS across all products or anything like that, but there are some restrictions and reporting requirements that they have rolled out throughout the last couple of years. For example, FDA, they worked with manufacturers to voluntarily phase out certain PFAS in food contact paper and packaging, and they ended authorizations for PFAS used as grease-proofing agents in paper and paperboard food packaging. So that includes things like fast food wrappers and, generally any food contact paper-based packaging. So that was at the FDA level, and on the EPA side of things, the Environmental Protection Agency released what was called a PFAS strategic roadmap back in October 2021 that laid out an agency-wide approach to addressing PFAS. And several actions have been taken as a result of that roadmap already. That included finalizing a rule that prevents any manufacturer from resuming the manufacture of or processing of inactive PFAS without EPA review. EPA also eliminated approval for 12 PFAS as inert ingredients in pesticides, which prohibits their continued use without new review. But on top of that, I'd like to just offer that states have also taken a lead to phase out PFAS from consumer products. Including here in New York, our legislature has enacted laws prohibiting the sale of several types of products, as I mentioned before, that were historically known to contain PFAS, and those again include food packaging, apparel, and any carpet containing PFAS.
All right, thank you, Connor. One last question that we got beforehand, and then we'll move to the chat. And this is related to air deposition. So I'm going to ask Don Ward this question. If you're trying to measure aerosols of PFAS, let's say from a sewage plant, what are reliable options that can be used?
Yeah, hi, Don Ward here. I'm in the air toxics section of our Division of Air Resources here at DEC. This is a good question. EPA does not have any established methods for ambient air yet. There has been some scientific research done with what are called puff samplers, polyurethane foam samplers, and that's the collection method, and then EPA test method TO13A is used for the analytical portion. Our experience is more in source air testing, which is like stack testing. So we would go to a facility and run the EPA test methods for that stack exhaust air to determine if there are any emitted PFAS compounds that we could then put those emission rates into our modeling runs to predict the concentrations at the property line. So really, there's some growing scientific literature on the ambient air test methods, but we don't have a lot of experience here with it because there are no EPA approved methods as of yet. But that puff sampler with the TO13A has been used by especially some scientific communities or research institutions.
Great, thank you, Don. All right, I'm gonna try and monitor this chat. I've been trying to multitask here as best I can. But the first question I see is for our friends at DOH. I'll kick this to Katie Bush. Will New York revise its maximum contaminant levels, MCLs, for PFOA and PFOS from 10 ppt to 4 ppt to be consistent with federal standards?
Sure, thanks, Andy. So I do want to highlight that in 2024, EPA released final maximum contaminant levels. Based on that existing federal rule, public water systems must monitor for these PFAS by 2027. Those water systems must also provide the public with information on the levels of those PFAS in their drinking water, also beginning in 2027. And then beginning in 2029, public water systems must work to reduce those PFAS and provide public notice when monitoring shows that drinking water levels exceed those levels. So I just want to reiterate that New York is continuing to enforce the state regulations that have been in effect since 2020 and is moving forward with implementation of the federal rule.
All right, thank you, Katie. Okay, I also see questions, another landfill question. Question here, and I guess Paula, this is for you, is do the leachate rules apply to closed landfills or only active landfills?
So I suspect this question is related to the proposed rulemaking that Pam mentioned during the presentation. And so that rulemaking, the universe of the rulemaking will be active municipal solid waste landfills and active C&D landfills with leachate collection systems.
All right, thank you, Paula. Next question I see relates to speedies. So Sarah, I'm not sure you've answered a question yet, but I think this is for you, Sarah Latessa. Question is, when speedies permits come up for their 5-year renewal, can DEC could administratively continue them and defer a full permit renewal? And do administratively renewed Speedies permittees avoid having new requirements to test for PFAS built into their permits? That's a two-part question. Let me know if you need me to repeat it, but
I'll do
Sarah,
my best.
okay, go right ahead.
I'm Sarah Latessa. I'm in the Division of Water here at DEC. The Division of Water did update our administrative renewal forms to include questions specifically aimed at trying to understand the potential presence of PFAS in facilities waste streams. So once those forms are submitted, the Division of Water staff review the questions and then determine if the form can be administrative, if the permit can be administrative or renewed, if we need to request more data, or if we should just request a full application at that time. What was the second part of the question?
Yeah, sure. Do administratively renewed permittees avoid having new requirements to test for PFAS built into their permits?
Well, we would make it an educated assessment based on their answers to their questions, and then potentially renew their permit. But we can always request for additional information during their permit term, and anytime that they need to submit a new full application, we are requiring the full suite of PFAS testing. So eventually, we would get the data.
Okay. And it looks like there's one other related question. You might have already answered this, but for my benefit, you know, we have the guidance values for PFOA and PFOS the water's established, right? Have the limits been built into any Speedies permits for industrial facilities or POTWs? And if so, about how many?
It's hard to say how many, but yes, they certainly have. As the data is coming in from our request for informations, which were done in response to release of our TOGs 1313 and 1314. We have started to get that data and process it, and as that's happening, we are updating permits to include limits or action levels to address PFAS and add additional monitoring to permits. So that is happening. I know of, you know, a dozen or 2 dozen that have been issued, and several more are in the queue.
Great. Looks like, yeah, I think that's it on questions for you, Sarah. This looks like either Katie Bush or Dave Chisano question on the private well rebate program. How much in rebates will a private well owner be eligible for alternate water supply to either install a treatment system or hook up to a public water system?
You can take it, Katie, if you want.
Sure, thanks, Dave. So basing our program plans on sort of market value of these treatment systems at this time, we do plan to offer up to $5,000 for the installation of a treatment system or up to $10,000 for service connection to an existing public water system when feasible.
And then one follow-up question there, and I don't know if it's better for you or Dave, Katie, is as far as testing of the private well, will they be using the EPA method we discussed earlier, 1633?
Well, I think actually the method used for drinking water most commonly is 537.1, now version 2, and so that's the method that we will plan to use.
Great. I'm not sure who the best one for this is, but I'll just ask the question and then maybe somebody can jump in to answer it. Has to do, and I think somewhat similar to, you know, other PFAS. The question is, how are you getting ahead of problems by looking for other PFAS structures? Is New York State engaged in developing test methods needed to test environmental media, air, water, soil for all PFAS at the needed low levels for PFAS and products? That's really, I think, you know, what are we doing to understand the unknown, I think is the question. So I don't know who wants to jump in and try and take that one.
I'll jump in, and one of the best tools for this is using what they call the total oxidizable precursor prep method, which oxidizes all those thousands of PFAS chemicals that we don't have tests for and converts those to the carboxylic acids that we do have tests for. And that gives us a general idea of how much of the long chain and short chain PFAS chemicals that we have in that wild mix of chemicals, and gives us the lowest detection limit for those chemicals and the most specific information compared to some of those other test methods out there, like the total organic fluorine and tests like that don't have the reporting limits that we're looking for. So that's our preferred method for looking at other PFAS compounds that we don't have test methods for.
Great, thank you, Bill. I see a couple related questions asking about, we mentioned granulated activated carbon, right? So this is the technology that's widely used to treat and remove PFOA, PFOS from drinking water. And the question is, and I think probably Dave Chisano, you're in the best position to answer this question. What happens to those filters, right? So they have a shelf life. They can only be used for so long. What happens to them? Are they disposed of? Are they recycled? Can you speak a little bit to what do we do with GAC, granulated activated carbon, when it's sort of reached its useful life for treatment?
Yeah, there's two things we do in our program. What we do is we collect it, manifest it, and ship it to Michigan for disposal and destruction. And for the bigger sites like in Newburgh or Hoosick Falls, where we have larger systems, we work with Calgon and have that carbon regenerated and reused at the site it was taken from. So none of it's taken to a solid waste landfill. It's destructed out in Michigan.
Great, thank you, Dave. Let's see, I'm trying, again, we only have a few more minutes left. I'm trying to look for some common questions so that I can address more than one person's question. I think we answered some of these already. Looks like there's a couple questions about the municipal exemption. And I'll take that one because I know about it. I'm working in that program right now. Again, this was for primarily the use of AFFF by municipal airports, fire departments, fire training centers throughout the state, which happened at the county level sometimes, or at the town, local level even, for a local fire department. So we have already received some requests from folks that know they have a problem, that have been working with us here at DEC to be eligible for that exemption. And we will be working with those specific municipalities to get information to make sure that they qualify for the exemption. So if you are out there and you're with a municipality that's curious about it, please reach out to DEC or in the Division of Environmental Remediation and our attorneys, and we can work with you to provide those requests for information to make sure that that your municipality qualifies for the exemption. Again, the thought being, if that is the case, that liability exemption is you know, we agree that you're subject to it. DEC would then perform the investigation and remediation of that site using state Superfund money, again, which was just reauthorized last year, which Pam mentioned in some of her opening remarks. Again, I'm looking through, oh, here's one we get sometimes that I think might be helpful for us to answer. So this next one, has DEC or DOH evaluated the potential for solar panel coatings to leach PFAS-related compounds into soil, stormwater, and groundwater? And I know we have one of our research scientists on the line, Fabio. Fabio, would you be able to talk a little bit about, you know, some research that's out there related to soil panels and PFAS?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, my name is Fabio Iwashita. I'm a research scientist in the Division of Environmental Remediation, working under Andy too. And to date, there is very little research on the subject. We have some studies done in Michigan, and it's pointing out that it might not be a potential source. And on top of that, the industry is already shifting to alternatives that do not require any PFAS coating or the use of PFAS, especially on the top, the glass on the top of the panels. I hope that answers the question. Thank you,
Yeah,
Andy.
that's great. Thank you, Fabio. And we're coming up on 3:15. So I think we're going to end it there. Again, we have a transcript of all the questions that were asked. I know that there were some specific site questions there too, which we want to take our time and get right and get back to you on. So I'll turn it back to Craig to wrap us up. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for attending today's stakeholder meeting. And if, like I said, we will be saving these questions, and we'll be responding to them in another time, and be reaching out to you. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and yeah, have a good day.